Kimberly, thank you so much for coming on this podcast. And you were so generous and had me on your show, and you were so loving. And I really enjoyed connecting, and I felt like we could have talked for hours and hours. So I'm so happy that we get to talk about your new book and all the things,
Thank you so much, Kathy. I'm so glad this finally happened in the right divine timing. We connected
right?
so much when we spoke about your book a few months ago. So thank you again so much for having me on.
Of course. Yeah, I'm really, really excited to dive into this book that you wrote. I know that there are so many things that you've been writing and so many books and so many conversations that you've had, but I feel like there's probably no better time for someone to have written this book that you just wrote. So for our audience who's listening, it's called The Hidden Power of the Five Hearts, and it came out about a year ago, maybe a little less.
It came out in October,
Of
actually.
2024. Yeah. So it's like maybe 7 or 6 months ago. Um, and I want to just talk about, first of all, I want you to explain the idea that there are five hearts. And I just think it's so fascinating. So let's just first talk about what that means. And then we're going to dive into how that helps us unlock so much of our own flow.
Yeah, so thank you. And this book, actually, Kathy, is my eighth book in 11 years. And I never
That's amazing. Really.
I've
My
been
God.
in this like sort of churning of what I really feel like I want to share, what I, brimming to get out in the world. And this book really came to me organically after, over 15 years of working in wellness, starting in nutrition, and then getting more into the emotional and spiritual side, our four cornerstones at Solluna, our food, body, emotional well-being, and spiritual growth. And with my last book, when I was doing research, I came across, which is called You Are More Than You Think You Are. I started to come across some amazing research around heart coherence and how the heart is another brain. And it was sort of tying together this, all my spiritual studies, which were bringing me back to this central place in the heart. And so I started to go down this whole rabbit hole about how the heart has been talked about in spiritual traditions around the world, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Jewish faith, a Sacred Heart of Jesus Christ, in Buddhism, the Anahata Chakra, right? Also in the Quran. So I said, wow, like we're in an age right now where there's so much confusion and overthinking. And the more I got into the spiritual aspect, the more I realized that the science of heart coherence, it was all backing everything up. It was a really centralized concept. And after working in wellness so long, I really believe, Kathy, that a big missing piece in wellness for so many people, including myself, was just coming back to this wholeness and this center, this place where we can really feel peace, this place, and we'll talk about the science and the spiritual aspects in a moment, where you can expand your perspective out, zoom out of rigid ideas, zoom out of guilt and shame, zoom out of so many things, like ways in which we perceive separation with others, and have a very different vision and get very different results and have a much higher level of emotional intelligence. So the five hearts are actually five stages of heart coherence, which where we go from incoherence, where the heart and brain aren't talking and we have a lot of fear and a lot of overwhelm, all the way to the clear heart. And these stages were named by Swami Sri Yukteswar, whose birthday was actually just a few days ago, who was a great yogi and a Vedic scholar. And these five heart stages were ones he talked about from the ancient texts. So again, there's this through line of the modern science and the ancient teachings, really culminating in the heart inside of all of us.
It's so beautiful. And I think about my grandmother who didn't even go to school past the fifth grade and had so much wisdom in her because she had such a big heart.
Mm.
She was so compassionate that when we would go to the grocery store and we were checking out, she would say to the person who was the clerk, she would say, "Have you had a hug today?" And the person would look at her like, "Are you crazy?" And then she would give them a hug. And I have often felt that the most impressive person is the most loving person, and the wisest person is the most loving. And when you're in a room, I mean, you and I both know a lot of people with a lot to say, and yet the thing that actually creates the most coherence in a space is a person who's making space. And what you just said, it just cuts through all the noise. It's like, if you put your hand on your heart at any moment in any given day, is it open or closed?
Mm,
And if you're in a conversation with someone, is the heart open or closed? And
mm-hmm.
what you just said is what very few people are really zeroing in on. And it just becomes like an intellectual, even spirituality becomes this kind of like intellectualized pursuit rather than like really anchoring into the very powerful practice of what it means to live with an open heart.
That's right. I think the science is interesting because it reinforces what I
Yeah.
think we know intuitively, right? This idea of coherence is when we feel that state of flow, and it's measurable with not just HRV numbers, but HRV patterns. And we did a research study with the Heart Math Institute on our heart aligned meditation. And we found in 4 weeks of people doing this 8-minute practice, 4 to 5 times a week, their heart coherence went up almost 30%, right? So, what that means is more immunity, more hormonal balance, better gut health, all these different factors. So, the wisdom that you were speaking of, your grandmother, which in the modern day, sometimes, Cathy, as we know, sometimes can start to people start to say, oh, it's woo woo, or just being like overly soft or sentimental, like the heart. But actually, what the ancients always knew was the heart was a power center, right? This direct pathway to the true self, to the higher self, however we like to think of it. And now the science shows there's 40,000 neurons in the heart, and that's why the heart forms first in the fetus, right? And the heart is actually sending more messages up to the brain than vice versa. So, you were talking about cutting through. I feel like in the world today, there's so much information and busyness and thoughts and hurried energy and things we're supposed to be doing all the time. But the simple practices I talk about in the book, which are in each stage to get you to the next stage of higher coherence, higher peace, higher clarity, higher abundance, they're really simple, and it's about cutting through and getting out of the thoughts instead of trying to battle the thoughts from the thoughts. When you come down into your heart, you start to turn on a very different type of wisdom. So it's not, impractical. It's actually the opposite. It's very rational. It's very common sense. You don't have to get swept up in the reactivity of the mind and these old patterns. You can actually start to create neuroplasticity between the heart brain connection, and you can just be much more of who you are instead of, reacting all the time from an overly emotional place.
Yeah, it's so beautiful what you just said, and I want to dive in deeper. And I'm sure people who are listening, because our listeners are really good students and readers and seekers, they might know a little bit about this or have heard a little bit about this. I know for myself, having done, I think I did 4 retreats with Dr. Joe, and there's so much to Dr. Joe Dispenza's work about the electromagnetic power in the heart and how we can do a coherence healing when we all synchronize our own hearts. And just having been in rooms like that multiple times, I mean, you are weeping. Like the amount of energy and love and openness and possibility that gets created. And I've been to the lab where we saw, how just people meditating with an open heart can change cells inside of an incubator. So can you talk a little bit about the power we have to
Yeah.
walk through the world with this turned on and actually create health and give people a biological update just from being ourselves in a state of an open heart?
Yes, and I know Dr. Joe has been heavily influenced by the science of the heart math as well. He's
Oh
come
yeah.
them. Sometimes, and thank you for saying that, because sometimes I've seen it with people where, I have to go to the spa, or I have to go to this retreat, or I have to have this experience. And it can be helpful to be with others, right? And I'm not discrediting that. But what's really powerful is when we start to realize that the power is walking around with us every
100%.
of every day, and every micro moment we can actually choose to be more in our hearts. And you said, living with an open heart, and it's a continuum. It's like over and over again we make this choice. And so I often, and I say this in the book, it's a really great practice. As soon as you wake up and you open your eyes, you can just start to breathe into your heart, take heart focused breaths, just putting your attention on your heart. For
Oh,
example, as I'm naturally touching my heart, research published in the American Journal of Cardiology shows this alone starts to rewire your nervous system. So you can start to do micro practices to come into this place, which over time, like I said, our research study was 4 weeks, but in as little as 3 days, you start to feel lighter and more
mhm.
energized, because incoherence means we're in a stress response, which we know disables our body. It pulls energy out of our GI tract. It lowers our immunity. We don't think clearly because everything is just out of whack. So coherence is like energy efficiency. Everything starts to come into what's called entrainment. Everything starts to become more harmonious and more efficient. So one of the things that you start to realize as you do this work, remember I said it's one of the missing pieces of wellness, where people walk around and they may be, the exact fitness level or body that they want, but they have no peace, Kathy, and their mind is racing and
Oh, I have no peace.
right? And so this piece of the puzzle makes everything so efficient. For me, my body had a lot more energy. My digestion got even stronger, and I never really get sick. Like all my skin started to look better because everything is part of this wholeness that's inside of us. And the heart is our center. So these practices that I talk about in the book and moving through the stages, which we can talk about, by the way, are dark, propelled, steady, devoted, and clear, means as you progress into spending more time in the higher stages, you have more vitality, you have more lightness, more joy, more peace, more creativity, deeper relationships, and you're less susceptible to stress. Because we do live in a world where a lot of things happen, but it's really our reactions. It's how
Sure.
we can really start to rewire our nervous system that makes the
Well,
difference.
it makes perfect sense, like perfect sense. The amount of people who will choose a pursuit that looks like it's about health only to find that that's the newest way for them to actually put themselves into stress because now they are punishing and shaming themselves, but they look on the outside like they're vital. And meanwhile, the amount of fight or flight and stress because there's actually not there's very little peace going on inside, right? And it's become just another way for them to create shame and pressure for themselves. It's really fascinating. Like my grandmother, who I mentioned, she lived to 96,
Mm.
and this was a person who knew nothing about biohacking or whatever, and her biggest biohack was empathy, which included herself, and like deep intimacy with people. Like, you know what I mean? Like the connections, the way she like kissed people's hands who took care of her at the end of her life and still listened to baseball games on the radio and got excited about things and never allowed herself to take on, what was happening globally. But she would say, I'm here to change the world for one person every day and not try to like it was just her biohack was having so much inner peace and really purpose and really joy and compassion. And she's just one example, but I think it's really interesting how many people can give you, tons of information about their microbiome, which is important, really important. And meanwhile, the amount of intensity that's going on in their mind is making them sick.
Wait, exactly. And it's funny, Kathy, because with the blue zones and Dan Buettner, who discovered the blue zones, is a good friend of mine. He's been on my podcast many times.
Same.
When I was, well, I don't watch a lot of things, but I saw his Netflix special, and there was this, I think she was one of the elders from Okinawa, and they asked her what her secret was for living to 106 or however old she was.
Yeah,
She said, I don't hold on to anger,
that's it.
right? So it's like letting go
Mic drop.
from the heart, right? Which is the bigger picture, compassion, anger with ourselves, anger with others. Like, hey, I'm learning and growing. This person is too. Not that clamping down, which is the mind, right? That clamping down is the stuffing down of vitality and health, right? And it's like this openness, like we talked about, an open heart is this ability to process and let go over and over again, right? In the daily life, oh, the traffic is here. You start to feel yourself constrict and get angry. And then you have to be able to breathe into your heart, do some of these heart coherence tools, pivot, shift, let it go, flow through the day, right? All the ancient teachings, the Tao Te Ching talks about water. It's like the most prevalent analogy, which is so powerful. Just like love is so powerful without forcing, rigid. It's this beautiful gentleness, but it shows the way. And
Yeah.
ultimately, and when this is one of the things in the book I talk about, because the propelled heart is where we have more energy than the fear of the dark heart, but it's still that always on, that burnout, like we see so much in modern life, go, 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 stressed out all the time. We realize that if we can actually be so centered in our heart, we don't have to spin our wheels all the time. We become far more efficient. We have more clarity instead of going this way and then this way and back and forth, right? Which I see so many people doing. They try this diet for a day, then they go back and they forth, and they don't know how to eat, and they don't even know when they're hungry. We can start to just find more of this stillness and this inner wisdom that all the great spiritual traditions really did teach us, and bring that into our life, because I feel like that's really been lost in the modern world, is this heart wisdom. We've gotten so heady, and everything's analytical, and everything's like quantitatively based, and there's more devices and more biohacking. And I'm not saying some of that can't be helpful, because it can, but not at the expense of completely foregoing our innate wisdom.
So what you mentioned before, those are the names of the five hearts. Explain to us what that means and how we can find a way to put them in balance.
Okay, so there's 5 heart stages, and we can dip in and out of all of them in a short period of time, but we tend to spend periods in one stage more than the other.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. The first one is the dark heart, and dark not as in bad, but dark like we can't see, right? Yoga talks about the third eye, having higher vision. So we're locked in a limited perspective, and this is where there's a lot of fear, confusion, overwhelm, dark emotions, dark feelings. Sometimes we don't feel at all. We're disconnected from our hearts. And then let's say more energy builds, we make a lifestyle change, or for whatever reason we start to have more energy, and then we enter the second heart stage, which is the propelled heart. So there's a little bit more coherence if we were to look at an HRV pattern, but this is a stage where I mentioned where it's like propelled into action. My worth is equated with how much I do, how much I achieve,
Mhm.
what I look like, my family status, how much money I have, what I look like on social media. So there's a lot of stress and a lot of that, a lack of peace. And then the third stage, we start to move a little bit more into incoherence, and we start to feel more steadiness inside. So we realize, Kathy, we can't change the world to be more steady, but we can be more of an anchor
Ah,
to ourselves.
love.
So we need less external validation. We're looking less to the opinions of others. We start to feel more clear in ourselves. So there's a big jump here. And then the fourth stage is the devoted heart. And this is where we become more devoted, as it would be, to inner heart, inner qualities. So we start to value peace more than just, how many followers we have on TikTok, right? We start to have a very high level of heart awakening and coherence. And the ironic thing is that even though we're really, more kind and compassionate, and valuing these inner qualities, things tend to work out more easily because coherence is magnetic. And we can talk about the science of the heart field in just a moment, but we're just better to it's easier for us to communicate. We have more emotional intelligence. We can really see what someone's trying to communicate, which is so much more than their words. And then there's still one more stage, which is the clear heart. And I use the analogy in the book of a prism. So first, when you see a prism, it's like, it's just kind of like, clear. It's not flashy. But what happens when you hold it up to the light, Kathy, right? It reflects all the colors. So there's this transparency with the clear heart. It becomes one with the universal heart. So in this full expression, the ego has really been silenced to the extent that the full power of unconditional love and peace and oneness and transcending these ideas of judgment and separation. So these are when we're in these moments, and it sounds like a really lofty stage, but let's say you're doing the dishes and you're just sort of not thinking. You're in this like really still place, or you're taking a shower, or you're looking into your child's eyes. So we go into moments of all of these stages. But what we can do with these tools and teachings, that's the purpose of the book, is to get you to be in the higher, the devoted and clear heart, and even steady heart stages more and more.
It's so beautiful. And I just love so many of the things that you just said. And one of them is, I mean, there's so many, so good. One of the things that you said was like, you can make the peace happen inside of you, which you can't do all around you. You're not in control of that. But even though that's such an obvious thing, it's really so important to know that and to be self-directed in that way. And everything that you were just sharing about the clarity to see and how the light then shows through all the different possibilities because you're open, you're in that beginner's mind, you're in that curiosity rather than the judgmental awareness, you're in this open awareness. And just sitting here thinking how people often are looking for like business advice, right? And it's like what you just said, that's, you don't need a business coach, you need that, right? Because if you walk into a meeting and you have the capacity and the generosity and the humility to make that kind of space for somebody, it's the most beautiful, potent thing that you could say or do in a meeting is just to come with that kind of heart-centered presence. And same thing in parenting. It's like everyone's reading all these books, and it's like you had the capacity to drop into your heart what gets revealed, what gets seen, what gets done. It's you're quantum leaping because you're actually moving from the most powerful place within you rather than this thin, really, really
Oh, it's flimsy.
exhausted muscle, flimsy. Yeah, exactly.
Well, no, I'm laughing, Kathy, because I feel, I mean, I can look at this book. Of all my books, I live this book, right? Like when I think about the stages of the propelled heart, and so much of my life was in that I call myself a recovering perfectionist, vying for achievement, having to be number one in the class, thinking I was a failure if I got an A minus, having eating
Uh,
disorders, like constantly counting every calorie, just so much micromanaging. And people from
uh,
the outside might be like, oh, look, like you're doing this YZ, XYZ, and you look like this. But there was so much anxiety, right?
sure.
And then you start to realize, like, what is really what matters to me in my life? And I think about my last relationship and now what I have with my husband and the life that I've been able to create with my kids. And it's funny, Kathy, because I'm not on social media so much, but I was on there and I was answering some of my comments and I saw a flash of this woman who a couple of years ago would have been like, oh, like feeling bad about myself. I should be like this person because she has a podcast too, and she's an author with the same publishing house. But I looked at her and she was like hustling and doing her like really fast talking videos and all the stuff she usually does, which is great for her. And I said to myself, Kathy, I was like, great for her. I said, it was so clear. I was like, I don't want, like, that's not who I want to be.
Exactly.
I
Oh my
don't want
God.
that. But younger Kimberly a few years ago would have been like, I should be bigger, like I should be this. It's just constant striving. And so now when I can say, wow, I just have so much more peace. And you
Beautiful.
know what, Kathy, this wholeness, because anytime we're in propelled heart, there's always a sense of lack. And to your point
Yeah,
about business meetings, people sense it. Like you don't feel like you're enough. You feel like you need to be smarter. You need
totally.
trees, like you need to have a better idea. And when you're in your heart, there's this abundance that you start to attract because you're not trying to be perfect and you're not pretending, you're not trying to wear these masks. You're just who you are. And it's very magnetic and it's very authentic.
I mean, it's so beautiful what you just said, and that was very generous of you to even share that vulnerable aspect of yourself. By the way, it just makes people like you more because they're like, yeah, I know exactly what I can relate. And I had a similar conversation with someone on my team, and it had to do with somebody else who wrote a book, and I wrote a book, and this person's book was like, hundreds of millions of copies were sold. And I said, that I saw this person being interviewed like a million times.
Mm-hmm.
I thought to myself, it's interesting how on our way through our journey, sometimes we have our ladder
Right.
on a particular outcome, and then we move the ladder, and the only outcome we want is peace and wholeness. And we look back and we say, wow, I was in such an interesting, sort of wounded part of myself that made me feel as though, that kind of nonstop output would equal a feeling of, success. And now what feels like success is having less on my calendar. What feels like success is really drinking, a cup of tea every morning and, you know, having my own garden boxes and I feel for that version of myself, that ever thought that would be a life well lived. It's like, oh my gosh, and yeah, it's
And
wild.
exactly, Kathy. And then also, I want to say that we can be incredibly productive and create a lot, but without that feeling of lack, you're never doing enough, like that voice that's always like more, more, more that I lived with for so many years. So now it's like, when I get coherent and clear, it's like, oh, reach out to this person, my energy is best spent doing this email or doing this, but it's never like, let me, jam in as much as I can. And ironically, I feel like, and I'm a busy working mom too, you just can create on such a different quantum level with quality, right? And you're creating from this place of, hey, this is really what's in my heart. This is really what I want to share. This is how I can support others. Like, this is what I feel like this project really needs.
Totally.
It opens up the world.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. Somebody recently posted like the top 200 spiritual influencers, and I was looking at the list and I was thinking, like, my rabbi who lives in the old city of Jerusalem for 50 years, who nobody knows, is like, he doesn't care that he's not on that list. The woman that you just talked about in the blue zones, she doesn't want to be on that list. You know what I mean? Like the people who are actually moving the stars to
Yeah.
actually bring coherence to our world and ecosystem are like these hidden righteous truth seekers rather than like, oh no, you know why I must be influential? Oh, well, obviously I am because I have, this particular amount of followers on Instagram. Like it's ridiculous that we have ever even gotten caught in any conversations about that, right? When we're here to do the work, which is, sit at Walden Pond, that's your legacy, get still. That's your legacy. So I love that you and I can rename that to people listening right now because that is such a distraction. That world is such a distraction from the deep, incredible, profound peace that lives within you and that you can offer to the world.
Exactly. Kathy, what I was saying about my younger, like my previous self, let's say from the propelled heart, I wouldn't have been able to see that. I would be like, Kathy, but wait, like this, and like, I'm doing this and I need to sell a certain amount of books. So what happens as you go through higher coherence, there is a connection we can say between the heart and the vision, which the yogis called the third eye, or you could just say higher perspective or whatever it is. So you can, nothing in your life could change except for you working on opening your heart, and suddenly you would see things a completely different way. You could see that person that annoys you in a completely different way and have a lot more compassion. You could see what your mother-in-law is really trying to say. So like me sitting here, I'm like, whoa. Instead of, a couple of years ago, be like, oh, I wish I was like that person and I sold as, many books in the first month as that. And like, what did I do? Like always the beating up or whatever, the comparisons. You start to see that wow, I'm so much more calm. I'm enjoying my days. And
Yeah.
this really is priceless. And the ancient texts talk about this, the Bhagavad Gita and the Vedic texts where Swami Sri Yukteswar is talking about how, focusing on the fruits of your labor, name, chasing fame, all these things, you call it a distraction. It is taking you out of what really brings you peace into external validation. Again, this is all from the propelled heart. And it's okay to have that stuff, and it's not bad to want to be successful. But we could say what's really like the real success is how peaceful you are. And that is real health, right, Kathy? I worked with celebrities for so many years. And it was interesting because I still don't own a TV and I never watched, I don't, I just am more drawn to books. So I never watch movies or TV shows. So sometimes I'd be like, why am I working with all these people? Like, why did God put me here? But it was a really interesting part of the journey where I could see that people were idolizing these like the most beautiful people in the world, and these people had so much anxiety and
Mm,
they had the same problems. And I was like, the world has it wrong. This is
yeah.
not getting us where we, where truth and peace live.
Yeah,
So
it's
there's
so fascinating. I was sharing the other day that from a Kabbalistic lens, we are here for our own soul correction, and therefore it has nothing to do with what anyone else is doing. Like the
yeah.
soul doesn't even get any reward from outcome. It only gets reward from how it makes choices and how it shows up and experiences and perceives a moment. Like that's all that we came to the world to do, is to correct our capacity to experience and perceive in full wholeness. Has nothing to do with achievement. And so we're literally here to answer to that part within ourselves, that soul, and to what the divine sent us here to do. And everything else is the complete distraction from what you're actually after, which is whatever assignment your soul is on for this lifetime, which is it makes everything so irrelevant. And when we are in a world where people have externalized and created that everything that matters is what they achieve, it gets really that confusing because it's really loud. That story is very loud. And yet when you get quiet, every time, if you really listen, you're going to hear what you need to remember, which has nothing to do with what you need to achieve externally. And that's why writing books like you're writing are so important. So important. So everything you just said is really such a good, important statement, which is the thing we're seeking is to be in coherence and to have this real luxury, which is peace. Like that's it.
And it's not a destination. Like here we are, and we're in peace land, and we never get off. So there's a section in the Devoted Heart chapter, and it's called Never Miss an Opportunity to Serve.
I
Because
love
we think
that.
about service, we think about these big lofty things like maybe I should just be volunteering every weekend, or maybe I'm in this like, wrong career path. But what this means, Kathy, is moment to moment doing the kind, the heartfelt, the loving thing. So are you in such a rush that you don't let that person into your lane? Or can you slow down and be like, hey, you look like you're in a rush. Let me just let this extra car in. Or let me
Yeah.
really look into the eyes of this checkout person at Target and, ask them how they're doing. Right. So the mind is like hurry, rush into achievement. So you can gloss over these micro moments, which really make up our life. Right.
That's it.
It's like these ideas, we can get rigid, we can get hard. You don't realize that you're walking around with a really tough resting face, shall we say. You kind of like look away from people in the elevator, whatever it is. But what this work is about is saying, as we just said, Kathy, it's not these big, lofty things at the end of your life like a list. It's this embodiment of hard
Yeah.
work moment to moment. If we're in trauma, if we're in reactivity, if we're in old patterns, we don't feel like ourselves. I remember being in the propelled heart and being like, sometimes I could get snippy because I really wanted to get this project done or whatever. And that's not who I am. So what feels really good, what feels like success is if I can be more peaceful, but also kind and loving and stay connected to myself and others. The name of my podcast is the Feel Good Podcast. Not feel good as in like we're giggly all the time, but feeling good to me is feeling whole and connected and authentic, right? So then it's like each moment really counts. And if you go away from your heart, it's okay too, right? Because we're all human and we can learn and then we can see, oh, this didn't feel so good. And it keeps directing us back. And the
Yeah.
more coherent we become and we do the practices like the heart aligned meditation and the harmonized in life that have the research and the scientific practices in the book, it becomes easier and easier. You're rewiring yourself.
Let's talk about that. So if people are listening, we'll obviously direct them to get the book. And in terms of taking one step into the practices in the book, give us one sense of a practice that we might start to work with that can help us to achieve this state of being.
Do we have time to do a practice, Kathy? Or
Sure.
do like a mini, like a
Yes,
2 minute.
I love it.
Okay,
True.
like a
Thank you. What a gift. That's so generous.
Okay, so this is a super brief touching in, and we see how we really can go directly there, right? This more still we get. So we're going to close our eyes, unless you're driving. You can come back to this later. Otherwise, we're just going to close our eyes for a moment, and straight away, you're going to place your attention on your heart. So, I mean your physical heart and also your energetic heart, right here in the middle of your chest. Just dropping in, feeling. You can even touch your heart physically if that helps you connect. And now we're going to take a few deep breaths, imagining that you're breathing in and out of your heart, like your heart is your lung. Okay. So focusing on your heart, we're going to breathe in for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And exhale out for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Keep bringing your attention back to your heart. And again, one more deep cycle like that, breath cycle, inhaling for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And exhaling for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now we won't count the breaths anymore, but keep your attention on your heart. And I want you to imagine someone or something that makes you feel appreciation. So, appreciation is a mix of gratitude, thankfulness, and awe. It could be a loved one or a beautiful sunset. I just want you to focus on this feeling of appreciation right in your heart. Feel a little tingly, maybe a little expansive or warm. We're just going to rest here for another moment or two. It's really going into this feeling of appreciation. And take another deep breath into your heart. And exhale. One more deep breath, breathing in that appreciation, which can start to naturally expand out into peace and love. And exhaling out appreciation, peace, and love. And just take one last moment to thank your amazing heart for all of its wisdom. It's always there for you, right here, right inside. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes.
Beautiful. So beautiful.
And you know what's, I'll show you this graph really quick. Cathy, the more we get into the, let's see this little, it's really amazing when you see these self-generated emotions, right? We can start to recall someone or something that makes us feel that appreciation. And the reason we did appreciation, this is on page 29 in the book. You can see how it really changes your coherence. Whereas when we're irritated or frustrated or
Wow.
it's very jumpy, and this is your thoughts, this is your energy going down, this is your gut health being out of whack. So in the research study, we went into appreciation and we stayed there for 2 minutes, which over time, like your mind starts to jump around. But did you feel a little tingliness? That's
Yeah.
actually neurons wiring and shifting, and that is creating that entrainment. something as simple, and it's appreciation is a little bit more expansive than gratitude, but this is research to bring that heart coherence so that you can feel calmer. You become more resilient to stress and old thoughts. It's really amazing. It's really simple, like this simple practice, the heart focused breathing, which has been shown to start to change your messages up to the brain. So there's science and there's ancient spirituality to it as well.
Yeah, for anyone who was only listening and not watching, Kimberly was just showing a page from the book with two graphs that actually maps the heart coherence and can show the difference between what's happening in the heart and the body, so to speak, when you're focused on anger and what's happening when you're focused on appreciation. So that's really cool. Is there something else you want to add to the science by which doing this actually gives you better quality of like health and vitality? And how does it actually also maybe scientifically help you to, in this conversation, we talk a lot about manifestation and
Oh,
designing a life. Like, how does the science of your heart coherence actually change your health and change the way you manifest the life around you?
so two separate questions. These are great. And again, in the book, there's so many research studies that I reference because I think it's interesting. I think for the
Yes,
discerning mind, just to say, oh, this isn't published research, so I can start to really believe this.
exactly.
So one of the interesting studies was about hormones, which we know are so important to our health and wellness at all stages of our lives. And this particular study was using the research, and I'll hold it up, and I know some people are just listening to this, but in
Yeah.
1 month of doing the heart coherence practices that I teach in the book, the research based on this, DHEA, which is a precursor hormone, which is important for vitality, for fertility, for many things, for us to feel that aliveness, went up 100%. And cortisol went down 23%. So I just got my blood work done a few months ago, Kathy, and my DHEA level and all the hormone, the hormone panels were balanced. It was the level of like a 18 to 22-year-old woman, right? So this is going
Whoa,
age into how the energy inside of us
that's incredible.
start to really go to levels that we couldn't even imagine. Again,
Sure.
aliveness, your skin repairing, your body just functioning. And then the other question you asked was about manifestation. So coherent harmony breeds abundance, right? Like that graph we just looked at with the with the anger, it's like all over the place. It repels things away from you and repels opportunities. So when we look at the heart field, which is this picture on 45, what this is, I believe in my heart, no pun intended, Kathy. This is the most powerful way to manifest because as we become more coherent, we're aligning with all of life and all of oneness. We're not falling out of sync. We're not going into just me, or isolation or fragmentation or over competition. We're saying, hey, I'm part of this.
Yep.
Part of this is where you can pull anything that you want to create, anything, right? In alignment. And so when I was, I think we chatted about this maybe when we were doing our other show, but when I was in a clear heart moment, I remember coming out of my door in my apartment in New York when I lived there and feeling so clear. A couple of months before I had Deepak Chopra review a book.
Yeah. That was so cool. That story.
Yes, but then I was like, I'm gonna go to this I had to go to this meeting in the East Village, but I just randomly decided to go around Union Square Park, which makes no sense because I would have walked twice as long. But I was just in the flow. So I
Yep.
walked the other way and I ran into Deepak on the street.
Yeah.
I was like, Deepak, it's Kimberly, you just reviewed my book. So because of this moment of coherence, he gave me his cell phone number. I imagine other people come up to him all the time. And we met at a coffee shop a few weeks later. And in 2 hours, we decided to write a book together called Radical Beauty, which went on to become a New York Times bestseller. And it was from this place of creating, right? Wholeness,
Exactly. Ah, love those stories.
conscious ego mind, Kathy, was like, keep writing to the email on the website or just like force your way through or try to show up at a conference and da da da. This just happened in the infinite intelligence of the universe. right?
Yeah.
And we have those moments, we have these synchronicities. So this is the field, the clear heart is really where miracles live. The conscious mind is like, well, I don't know how that could have worked out, but there's so much more than we can see, right? There's just so much quantum energy and alignment. And so the more we open our hearts, the more we get out of the fragmentation of the mind, we open ourselves up to pure manifestation.
Ah, it's so pure because it's just happening beyond space and time. It's happening inside the frequency that is the most powerful, which is love. And it's such a magnet. It's amazing. And yeah, it's so cool. So tell everybody where they can listen to your podcast and buy your book and all the things.
So The Hidden Power, The Five Hearts is available anywhere books are sold. My central hub is mysolluna.com, where we have lots of courses and workshops on the heart, as well as wellness, recipes, all sorts of things. It's the Feel Good podcast, and we have our amazing interview with you, Cathy, up there from a few months ago, which I hope everyone listens to as well. Also, social, I should say, at underscore Kimberly Snyder for positive social, right?
You're also so beautiful. I just want to say
Oh, from the heart. And your heart is so beautiful.
thank you for this conversation. I'm so at peace. I'm just like
Oh,
floating right now.
thank you so much, Cathy. I just love you and your big heart and chatting with you. We could chat all day. And
Same.
I'm just so appreciative.
I'm so appreciative also.